Narcissists often have an immense fear of emotional intimacy, and this fear profoundly affects their relationships. While they may seek admiration and validation from others, they struggle with genuine connection, which requires vulnerability, empathy, and reciprocity. Emotional intimacy requires the ability to share one's true self, flaws, desires, weaknesses, and fears. For the narcissist, this type of closeness is terrifying. It challenges their carefully constructed image of perfection and exposes the very vulnerabilities they are desperately trying to avoid. Instead of seeking out deep, meaningful relationships, narcissists often keep others at a distance, preferring superficial interactions that allow them to maintain control. At the core of the narcissist's fear of emotional intimacy is their insecurity. Despite their outward appearance of confidence and superiority, narcissists are profoundly insecure about their worth. They rely on admiration and external validation to feel valued, and any threat to their self-image feels like an existential crisis. Opening up emotionally would force them to expose their flaws, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities, the very things they work so hard to protect and conceal. If they were to be emotionally intimate, they would risk being rejected or criticized for their imperfections, which is something they can hardly tolerate. This fear of exposure leads them to build walls around themselves, preventing others from truly getting close. This inability to embrace emotional intimacy manifests in several ways. Narcissists often create relationships that are transactional, where they give little and expect a lot. They may enter relationships with the expectation of being admired, adored, and put on a pedestal. They might pursue connections with individuals who reinforce their sense of importance, but they rarely engage on a deeper emotional level. Narcissists often view others as tools to bolster their self-esteem, rather than as equals with whom they can build mutual trust and understanding. As a result, their relationships are shallow and their emotional needs remain unmet. In intimate relationships, a narcissist's fear of emotional closeness can manifest as emotional unavailability. They might avoid conversations that require them to open up or talk about their true feelings. Instead, they may deflect, change the subject, or shift the focus back onto the other person to prevent the conversation from delving into deeper, more vulnerable territory. If a partner expresses emotional needs or desires, a narcissist may respond dismissively, seeing it as a sign of weakness or an intrusion into their carefully maintained image of perfection. They may even criticize or belittle their partner's emotional expression, dismissing it as unimportant or irrelevant. In this way, they not only avoid intimacy, but also deflect any attempts at true emotional connection. Narcissists are often more comfortable in relationships that are based on admiration, power dynamics, and superficial interactions. They may surround themselves with people who are constantly affirming their greatness, but they struggle to connect with those who challenge or question their behavior. They fear being vulnerable because it requires them to admit that they are not perfect, that they are not invincible, and that they have emotional needs that go beyond being admired. This fear of vulnerability makes it difficult for narcissists to develop empathy, as they are more focused on themselves and their need for validation than on understanding the emotional experiences of others. Emotional intimacy requires mutual understanding and reciprocity, but the narcissist is too preoccupied with protecting their own image to truly listen to or care for someone else's emotional needs. Furthermore, the narcissist's inability to experience true emotional intimacy often leads to feelings of isolation. While they may have many superficial relationships, they lack the deep, meaningful connections that come from true emotional vulnerability. Narcissists may feel a sense of loneliness despite their outwardly full social lives because they are unable to form lasting, authentic relationships. They may seek constant attention and admiration, but this only reinforces their sense of emptiness. No amount of praise or adulation can fill the emotional void that results from their inability to connect with others on a deeper level. The narcissist's fear of intimacy is also rooted in a fear of being controlled or rejected. Emotional closeness means relinquishing some measure of control, and for the narcissist, control is a critical component of their self-image. They fear that once they allow someone to get close to them, they will lose power over the relationship. Intimacy involves trust, and trust requires vulnerability. For For the narcissist, trusting someone else means surrendering some control, and this idea is deeply unsettling. They may also fear that emotional closeness will expose their insecurities or flaws, leading to rejection. The fear of being exposed or unloved creates a barrier that prevents them from forming real connections. In romantic relationships, this fear can be particularly destructive. Narcissists may idealize their partner at first, creating a fantasy of a perfect relationship. However, once the initial idealization fades, they often struggle with the emotional demands of the relationship. They may become frustrated when their partner expresses the need for emotional intimacy or support. Because they cannot meet these needs, they often withdraw or deflect, sometimes engaging in manipulative behaviors like gaslighting or guilt-tripping to maintain control of the relationship. Instead of building a strong emotional bond, the narcissist may focus on maintaining their image as the superior partner rather than truly engaging with their partner's emotional world. The narcissist's fear of emotional intimacy also leads to difficulties with self-reflection. True emotional connection requires self-awareness and the willingness to examine one's own feelings and behaviors. Narcissists are often unable to do this, as their self-image is built on the denial of their flaws. They may project their insecurities onto others, blaming them for the problems in their relationships rather than acknowledging their own role. This lack of self-awareness further isolates them, as they are unable to learn from their mistakes or grow emotionally. In the end, the narcissist's fear of emotional intimacy is a defense mechanism that keeps them stuck in a cycle of shallow relationships and emotional isolation. By avoiding vulnerability and genuine connection, they protect themselves from the deep fear of rejection and exposure. However, this constant avoidance only exacerbates their sense of loneliness and emotional emptiness. The more they push others away, the more they reinforce the belief that they are unworthy of true emotional closeness, perpetuating a cycle that is difficult to break. The narcissist's inability to embrace emotional intimacy ultimately leaves them disconnected from the very relationships that could provide them with the sense of fulfillment and connection they so desperately crave. The narcissist's need for constant admiration and validation is a crucial aspect of their psychological makeup. It is not merely a desire to be liked or appreciated, but a fundamental necessity to maintain their fragile self-esteem. Narcissists are highly dependent on external sources of validation to feel valuable, as their sense of self-worth is often hollow and deeply rooted in the opinions of others. They require continuous praise and recognition, and this need shapes much of their behavior and interactions with others. Without constant reinforcement, their sense of self quickly crumbles, leaving them exposed to feelings of emptiness, inadequacy, and fear of being unworthy. For the narcissist, admiration is not just a form of social feedback. It is the very lifeblood of their self-image. They cannot exist without the validation of others, as their internal sense of self is too fragile and unstable to stand on its own. This need for admiration is often insatiable, as the narcissist continually seeks new sources of praise to fill the void that exists within them. The validation they receive may temporarily boost their self-esteem, but it is fleeting, and they soon find themselves needing more. This cycle of craving admiration and seeking validation is exhausting, not only for the narcissist, but for those around them as well. One of the most striking characteristics of narcissistic behavior is the way in which they manipulate those around them to feed their need for admiration. Narcissists are adept at charming others and positioning themselves in ways that make them the center of attention. They may embellish their achievements, exaggerate their qualities, or play on the emotions of others to gain admiration. They often surround themselves with people who are willing to provide this constant reinforcement, seeking out relationships where they can be admired and adored without question. In these relationships, the narcissist tends to take, often without giving much in return, because their focus is entirely on receiving admiration and validation. The narcissist uses others as a mirror to reflect their perceived greatness back to them, bolstering their sense of importance and ensuring that their self-esteem remains intact. Narcissists are also extremely sensitive to any form of criticism or rejection. Even mild or constructive criticism can feel like a devastating blow to their ego. Because their sense of worth is so dependent on the approval of others, even the smallest hint of disapproval can trigger intense feelings of shame, anger, and defensiveness. This sensitivity to criticism often leads to disproportionate reactions, with the narcissist reacting with hostility, defensiveness, or even rage when their image is threatened. To maintain their sense of superiority, they will often deflect blame, shift responsibility, or distort the truth to avoid any acknowledgement of their flaws. They cannot accept that they might not be perfect, and any suggestion to the contrary is seen as a personal attack. The narcissist's dependency on admiration also leads to a cycle of superficial relationships. They tend to gravitate toward people who will feed their need for validation and avoid those who might challenge their image or offer constructive criticism. As a result, their relationships are often one-sided, with the narcissist expecting constant adoration while offering little in return. This lack of reciprocity is not due to malice, but stems from their deep inability to recognize the needs of others or to connect on a genuine emotional level. Their interactions are transactional, based on what they can gain from others rather than on mutual respect or emotional support. This relentless need for admiration can also lead narcissists to act in ways that are manipulative or self-serving. They may go to great lengths to maintain the facade of perfection, even if it means using others or engaging in deceitful behavior. Narcissists are often highly skilled at controlling the narrative of their lives, selectively sharing information or presenting themselves in a way that ensures they are seen in the best possible light. This manipulation is not necessarily malicious, but is driven by their intense need for external validation. They feel a deep sense of emptiness without it and will do whatever it takes to keep the praise flowing. However, the narcissist's dependency on admiration can never be fully satisfied. No matter how much attention or praise they receive, it is never enough. The hunger for validation is insatiable, and this leaves the narcissist perpetually chasing after external sources of affirmation. They may shift their focus from one person to another, from one achievement to the next, always seeking the next fix of praise. This cycle is exhausting, and it leads to a sense of emotional emptiness that cannot be filled by external validation alone. The more they seek admiration, the more they reinforce their belief that their worth is contingent upon the approval of others, and they remain stuck in a cycle of dependence that leaves them constantly dissatisfied. The narcissist's need for constant admiration also makes them highly vulnerable to rejection. Since their sense of self is so dependent on the validation they receive from others, any form of rejection feels like a personal catastrophe. Being ignored, criticized, or devalued can send the narcissist into a tailspin of self-loathing and rage. They may lash out at those who reject them, attempting to reassert their dominance and ensure that their image is not tarnished. Alternatively, they may withdraw into themselves, retreating to protect their fragile sense of self from the pain of rejection. In either case, their emotional response to rejection is disproportionate and often destructive, not only to themselves, but to the relationships they engage in. At its core, the narcissist's need for admiration is a reflection of a deep and persistent fear of being insignificant, unworthy, or invisible. They cannot bear the thought of being ordinary or unimportant, and their need for constant affirmation is a way to shield themselves from the terrifying prospect of being overlooked or discarded. The constant cycle of seeking validation is an attempt to stave off feelings of inadequacy and emptiness. However, this endless pursuit of praise only serves to perpetuate the narcissist's emotional instability, as it is impossible to find lasting fulfillment in external validation alone. No matter how much admiration they receive, it will never be enough to fill the void within them, and they will continue to search for more, always feeling empty and unfulfilled in the end. The narcissist's desire to escape self-doubt and insecurity is a critical driving force behind much of their behavior. These individuals often project an image of confidence, certainty, and superiority, but underneath this facade lies a deep and persistent fear of not being enough. Narcissism at its core is a defense mechanism that shields them from confronting the painful realities of their own self-perception. They struggle with a fragile sense of self-worth, one that is easily threatened by the possibility of failure or rejection. The need to constantly reinforce their own sense of importance is born out of this insecurity, as they try to escape the vulnerability that self-doubt brings. Self-doubt, for the narcissist, is a terrifying emotional state. It challenges the carefully constructed image of perfection they have worked so hard to create. This image serves as a barrier between them and the harsh realities of their true feelings and insecurities. If the narcissist were to admit even a small amount of self-doubt, they would have to acknowledge their imperfections, their failures, and their emotional vulnerabilities. For someone who has based their entire identity on being exceptional and flawless, the idea of confronting their flaws feels unbearable. Instead, they push these feelings aside and avoid them at all costs. This avoidance manifests in several ways. One of the most common is the narcissist's need for constant admiration and external validation. They seek to surround themselves with people who reinforce their sense of superiority, who tell them how great they are, how important they are, and how they are deserving of special treatment. These affirmations serve as a temporary antidote to their self-doubt. When they are praised, they feel a fleeting sense of relief from the fear that they might not be as perfect or valuable as they want others to believe. However, this validation is never enough, and the narcissist is left constantly chasing new sources of approval, always in search of more adulation and recognition. Another way the narcissist tries to escape their self-doubt is through the manipulation of others. They may play mind games, use charm, or create dependency in their relationships to maintain control and to keep people in their orbit. By controlling how others perceive them, they can prevent themselves from confronting the truth of their own insecurities. The narcissist is often very skilled at projecting an image of confidence, but this image is not based on a solid foundation of self-assurance. Instead, it is a construct that masks the deep-rooted fear of being exposed as inadequate. By controlling their relationships and the way others interact with them, they protect themselves from the vulnerability that might expose their true feelings of insecurity. This constant pursuit of admiration and control stems from a fear that they are inherently unworthy. Narcissists often harbor a deep-seated belief that they are not good enough, that they do not measure up to the standards they have set for themselves or that others have set for them. This belief is not always conscious, but it shapes their behavior in profound ways. The narcissist's identity is tied to being exceptional, but if they were to truly examine themselves, they would confront the terrifying possibility that they are not exceptional at all, that they are just like everyone else, with the same flaws, doubts, and imperfections. This is an unbearable thought, and so they continue to seek external validation to keep the fear of inadequacy at bay. The narcissist's self-doubt also manifests in their inability to accept criticism. Because their sense of worth is so fragile, even the smallest hint of criticism can feel like a devastating blow to their identity. Any feedback that suggests they are not perfect, that they have made a mistake, or that they are not as extraordinary as they believe themselves to be, is experienced as an existential threat. This is why narcissists often react with anger, defensiveness, or even rage when criticized. They are not just defending their actions, they are defending their very sense of self. To acknowledge that they are not infallible would be to acknowledge that their entire identity is built on a shaky foundation. As a result, they deflect, deny, and lash out, desperately trying to maintain the illusion that they are flawless and invulnerable. At a deeper level, the narcissist's insecurity is rooted in a profound sense of loneliness. Despite their attempts to control and manipulate others, narcissists often feel disconnected and isolated. Their relationships are based on power dynamics, not genuine emotional intimacy. They struggle to form authentic connections with others because they are too afraid of being vulnerable, of showing any weakness. This isolation only deepens their feelings of inadequacy. They may appear to have a perfect life, but in reality, they are constantly battling with an inner sense of emptiness, of not being enough. This emptiness is something they cannot fill, no matter how much they achieve or how much praise they receive from others. The narcissist's avoidance of self-doubt and insecurity is not just about protecting their ego. It is also about avoiding the emotional pain that comes with confronting these feelings. Self-doubt and insecurity are uncomfortable emotions, and for the narcissist, they are associated with feelings of worthlessness and fear of rejection. To avoid this pain, the narcissist creates a perfect image of themselves, one that they can present to the world and to themselves. They invest a great deal of energy into maintaining this image, often at the expense of their emotional well-being and their relationships. But no matter how hard they try, they cannot escape the fundamental truth that their sense of worth is fragile and the fear of being exposed remains ever present. In their pursuit of validation and control, narcissists are constantly trying to outrun their self-doubt. They may never truly face it, but it is always lurking beneath the surface, driving their need for admiration, their manipulation of others, and their inability to accept criticism. This ongoing struggle to escape their own insecurities defines much of the narcissist's behavior, and it is what makes them so difficult to understand and even harder to engage with in any meaningful way. The illusion of superiority is one of the most pervasive and defining features of narcissism. For the narcissist, this sense of being exceptional or above others is not just an emotional or psychological tendency, it is an integral part of their identity. They construct a narrative of their life in which they are the hero, the individual who stands out, who is deserving of special treatment, and who deserves to be admired and revered. This illusion of superiority is both a coping mechanism and a defense against the deep-seated insecurity that lies beneath the surface. Narcissists believe, at least on a conscious level, that they are better, more capable, or more important than others, and they seek to reinforce this belief at every turn. This sense of superiority is often exaggerated, bordering on delusion. Narcissists may see themselves as more intelligent, more talented, or more successful than those around them, and they will go to great lengths to ensure that others perceive them in the same way. This illusion serves as a buffer against the emotional pain of feeling inadequate or unworthy. By positioning themselves as exceptional, they create an emotional distance from the vulnerability and self-doubt that they fear would overwhelm them if they were to acknowledge their true feelings. The belief that they are superior protects them from the discomfort of facing their own flaws and insecurities. To maintain this illusion of superiority, narcissists often engage in various forms of self-aggrandizement. They may exaggerate their accomplishments, inflate their status, or embellish their talents. They may present themselves as uniquely gifted or extraordinary, sometimes to the point of inventing stories or adopting an air of mystique to enhance their image. The need to present themselves as exceptional extends to every aspect of their lives: career, relationships, appearance, and even their moral or intellectual superiority. Narcissists are often highly selective about the image they project to the world, curating every detail to reinforce the narrative that they are special, chosen, and above others. This illusion of superiority is not always based on tangible achievements, but is often more about perception. Narcissists are masters at creating an image, an aura of greatness, and they use this carefully constructed persona to manipulate how others see them. They may surround themselves with people who affirm their superiority, selecting friends, colleagues, and partners who admire and elevate their status. In this way, they are able to perpetuate the illusion that they are indeed exceptional, as they seek constant validation from others. The more they are praised and admired, the more they feel validated in their belief that they are above others. However, this illusion is inherently fragile. The narcissist's sense of superiority is not grounded in a deep, intrinsic understanding of their value or worth. Instead, it relies on external validation and admiration. Without this constant reinforcement, the illusion begins to crack. Criticism, failure, or even the slightest indication that they are not as extraordinary as they believe can cause a narcissist to react with anger, defensiveness, or contempt. To admit that they are not superior, that they have flaws or limitations, would require them to confront the very insecurity they work so hard to avoid. The fragility of their self-image makes them hypersensitive to anything that might challenge their sense of superiority. The narcissist's belief in their own superiority also leads them to devalue and dismiss others. Because they view themselves as exceptional, they often regard those around them as inferior or unworthy of their attention. They may feel entitled to special treatment, expecting others to defer to them or admire them without question. This sense of entitlement stems from the belief that they deserve to be treated as special, that their needs, desires, and opinions should always take precedence. As a result, narcissists often exhibit condescending or dismissive behavior toward others, failing to acknowledge the worth or contributions of those around them. Their relationships are often one-sided, with the narcissist expecting admiration, loyalty, and attention, but offering little in return. This sense of superiority is not just a psychological defense. It also shapes how narcissists engage with the world. They may position themselves as leaders, innovators, or experts in their chosen fields, even if their actual abilities or accomplishments do not fully support these claims. They often feel the need to dominate conversations, take center stage, and be the focal point of any group or social setting. In their eyes, being in control and being admired are not just privileges. They are necessities that affirm their sense of importance. This can make them difficult to work with or relate to, as their need for admiration and control often overrides their ability to collaborate or engage with others on equal terms. The narcissist's illusion of superiority also makes it difficult for them to accept genuine feedback or constructive criticism, because they see themselves as exceptional. They cannot fathom that they might be wrong, that they might not know everything, or that they might need to improve. Criticism is seen as an attack on their very identity, a challenge to the superiority they have carefully crafted. When faced with criticism, they may respond with anger, denial, or by shifting the blame onto others. Admitting mistakes or weaknesses would force them to confront the fact that they are not as perfect or infallible as they would like others to believe. This delusion of superiority is often reinforced by the narcissist's environment. In many cases, they surround themselves with people who are too willing to reinforce their image, either out of fear or out of a desire for approval. These individuals act as enablers, perpetuating the narcissist's belief that they are superior and deserving of special treatment. The more they are affirmed, the more entrenched this belief becomes. Over time, the narcissist becomes increasingly disconnected from reality, living in a world where their inflated sense of self-importance goes unchallenged. While the narcissist may present a picture of confidence and certainty, the truth is that their sense of superiority is a defense against their own vulnerability. It is a way to protect themselves from the deep fear of being ordinary, of being unimportant, or of being rejected. By creating an illusion of superiority, they maintain a facade of power and control, shielding themselves from the painful reality of their own self-doubt and insecurity. This illusion is what allows them to navigate the world, but it also isolates them from genuine connection and growth, as they are unwilling to acknowledge their imperfections and limitations. All right, let's dive into something that's both deeply profound and incredibly dangerous to ignore. We live in a world that's often obsessed with surface-level perceptions, with the way people present themselves and how they want to be seen. But what lies beneath this facade? What's really going on inside those individuals who, on the outside, seem to demand the attention and adoration of everyone around them? Narcissists are often seen as individuals who are self-absorbed, full of pride, and constantly in need of admiration. At face value, their behavior may appear to be driven by an inflated sense of self-importance or superiority. However, beneath this exterior lies a deep and pervasive fear of vulnerability. The narcissist's fear of vulnerability is one of the central forces that shapes their personality and drives their actions. It is this fear that motivates them to build walls of self-protection, to create a persona that is untouchable, invulnerable, and constantly in control. In many ways, this is an illusion, one that is desperately clung to in order to shield the narcissist from the terrifying prospect of facing their own inadequacies, insecurities, and imperfections. Vulnerability, for a narcissist, represents a profound weakness. It is not simply about being emotionally open or exposed to others. Rather, it symbolizes the very essence of human fragility. Narcissists often perceive vulnerability as a threat to their carefully constructed image of themselves. They view it as an entry point for others to discover their fears, their flaws, and their inability to meet their own lofty standards. In their eyes, to be vulnerable is to admit that they are not perfect, that they are not invincible. And, most critically, that they are not deserving of the constant admiration and attention they crave. To be vulnerable is to risk being seen as ordinary, flawed, or even worthless. And this is a risk they are unwilling to take. The fear of vulnerability is not something that exists in isolation. It is deeply intertwined with the narcissist's relationship with their sense of self-worth. Narcissism often arises from a fragile self-esteem, one that is constantly in need of external validation in order to feel adequate. This fragile self-worth is built on the idea that the narcissist must be superior, flawless, and always in control. Any deviation from this image is perceived as a threat, and vulnerability represents the ultimate form of deviation. To open oneself up emotionally or to acknowledge one's limitations would mean to expose the very cracks in the facade of perfection that the narcissist has so carefully constructed. In essence, vulnerability is the antithesis of the grandiosity they so desperately cling to. For the narcissist, admitting vulnerability would mean acknowledging their deep-seated fears and insecurities. It would mean recognizing that they are not above reproach, that they are not impervious to pain, criticism, or failure. This is not something they are capable of doing, at least not without great distress. Then, the act of allowing themselves to be vulnerable would force them to confront the very real possibility that they are not as flawless as they appear. This, in turn, could shatter the illusion of control they have worked so hard to maintain. It could lead them to a place where they feel small, insignificant, and unworthy, a place they have spent their entire lives avoiding. Instead of embracing vulnerability, narcissists often choose to suppress it through defensive mechanisms such as arrogance, aggression, or even indifference. They may lash out at others who challenge their image or try to expose their weaknesses. By deflecting attention away from their vulnerabilities and projecting an image of power and invulnerability, they attempt to shield themselves from the painful reality of their own emotional fragility. This is not an active choice to reject vulnerability, but rather an unconscious attempt to protect themselves from a perceived existential threat. They push away anything that might force them to confront their own limitations, and in doing so, they create a world where they are the dominant force, safe from exposure, safe from weakness. The fear of vulnerability is not something that can be easily overcome for the narcissist. It is a defense mechanism that has been deeply ingrained over time, often as a result of early life experiences. Many narcissists have experienced emotional neglect, abuse, or invalidation during their formative years. These experiences may have left them with a deep sense of insecurity and a belief that they are unworthy of love and affection unless they meet certain standards of excellence or perfection. In order to protect themselves from the emotional pain of rejection or failure, they develop a persona that is shielded from vulnerability, a persona that is constantly seeking external validation and admiration in order to compensate for their internal sense of inadequacy. This fear of vulnerability also plays a critical role in the narcissist's relationships. They may struggle to form genuine, intimate connections with others because they are unwilling to expose their true selves. Instead, they may engage in superficial relationships, ones that are based on admiration and adulation, but lack emotional depth or authenticity. True vulnerability requires a level of emotional intimacy that narcissists are often unwilling or unable to engage in. This creates a cycle in which the narcissist continually seeks admiration and validation from others, but never truly allows anyone to get close enough to see their true selves. They remain trapped in a pattern of isolation and self-protection, always afraid that their vulnerabilities will be exposed and that they will be rejected for who they really are. The need for control is a defining characteristic of narcissism. It is not simply about maintaining power over others, but about creating an environment where everything is manageable, predictable, and in line with their expectation. For the narcissist, control is the foundation upon which their identity is built. It provides them with a sense of stability in a world that feels unpredictable, a sense of safety in an emotional landscape that is otherwise fraught with vulnerability and insecurity. Control allows them to maintain the illusion of perfection, to present an image of invulnerability, and to avoid confronting the deep fears that lie beneath their surface. The narcissist's need for control stems from an underlying fear of chaos in their emotions, their self-image, and in their relationships with others. This fear of chaos is often rooted in a fragile sense of self-worth, one that is dependent on external validation and constant affirmation. When the narcissist feels that they have control, they feel more secure. Control provides a way for them to shield themselves from feelings of inadequacy, to create a buffer between their inner turmoil and the outside world. If they can manage their environment, they can maintain the facade of perfection and avoid the deep vulnerability that might arise from uncertainty. This need for control often manifests in various ways. One common strategy is the attempt to dominate and manipulate the people around them. Narcissists may seek to dictate the terms of relationships, setting boundaries and conditions that allow them to feel powerful and in command. They may use charm, flattery, or even intimidation to maintain their position of authority. By controlling others, they create a sense of security, as the behavior of those around them becomes predictable and conforming to their desires. In their minds, if they can ensure that everything and everyone is under their influence, they can avoid the unpredictable nature of human emotion and interaction. At a deeper level, the narcissist's need for control is a defense against their own internal sense of chaos. Their self-esteem is often fragile, and they constantly fear that the world will expose their inadequacy. They may feel that if they are not in control, their vulnerabilities will be revealed, and they will be exposed for who they really are. This fear drives them to manipulate situations and people to maintain a position of dominance. They may try to control not only their external environment, but also their internal world, attempting to suppress emotions such as shame, guilt, or fear that threaten to disrupt the image they have of themselves. For the narcissist, control becomes an obsession. It is not enough for them to feel secure. They must ensure that their environment reflects their desired image at all times. This leads them to micromanage relationships, making demands on those around them, and seeking constant reassurance and adoration. They may surround themselves with people who affirm their greatness, ensuring that their sense of control is reinforced and that they are never left to face the uncertainty of rejection or criticism. The more they can control the narrative of their lives, the less they are forced to confront the reality of their own limitations. The need for control is also tied to the narcissist's sense of superiority. They see themselves as unique, exceptional, and deserving of special treatment. To maintain this perception, they must ensure that others around them are subjugated to their will. By controlling those in their inner circle, the narcissist ensures that their status remains unchallenged. They want to be the center of attention, the one who dictates the course of events, and the one who is revered. This need for admiration is part of the broader desire to maintain control over how they are perceived and how others relate to them. However, this constant drive for control comes at a cost. It leads to a pattern of isolation, as narcissists often push people away who fail to meet their expectations or who threaten their sense of superiority. Their relationships are transactional, based on what others can provide in terms of validation or admiration. Genuine emotional connection becomes secondary to the need for dominance and recognition. In the long term, this need for control can become exhausting as the narcissist continually tries to maintain their grip on every aspect of their life, often at the expense of their own well-being and the well-being of those around them. Control is also a way for narcissists to avoid vulnerability. By controlling every aspect of their life, they avoid the discomfort of uncertainty and the possibility of being hurt or exposed. They keep their emotions tightly regulated and their relationships on their terms, ensuring that they are never in a position where they might have to face their insecurities. Vulnerability to them represents a threat to the order and predictability they work so hard to create. The more they can control, the less they have to acknowledge their own weaknesses, their own fears, or the uncertainty of their emotional experiences. This obsessive need for control can manifest in many areas of life. It may show up in their professional lives, where they demand perfection from themselves and others, constantly striving to be at the top and to maintain an unchallenged position of authority. It may extend to their personal relationships, where they manipulate dynamics to ensure they are the focus of attention and admiration. It may even infiltrate their internal dialogue, where they seek to maintain an image of perfection by controlling their thoughts and emotions. The more they can control, the more they can avoid confronting the vulnerabilities that lie beneath the surface. The need for control then becomes a coping mechanism, a way to protect themselves from the chaos of vulnerability and to preserve the illusion of invulnerability that keeps their world intact.